Vanessa Hale set the divorce papers on the table without a single tremor in her hand. Ethan Cross stared at them the way powerful men stare at things they never expected to lose, with disbelief first, then something colder. He was worth $3 billion. He had a penthouse in Manhattan, a name that opened doors before anyone knocked, and a wife who, by every account, had no reason to leave. "You're throwing everything away," he said. "For what?" Vanessa didn't answer. She picked up her coat, buttoned it slowly, and walked out. What Ethan didn't know, what he would have laughed at if anyone had told him, was that the woman who just left him had been undone not by another rich man, not by anyone in their world at all, but by a single father she had met in the hallway of an elementary school. A man named Marcus Carter, who drove a used truck, packed his daughter's lunch every morning, and had never once tried to impress anyone. But Marcus carried something Ethan never could. He carried the truth about a rainy afternoon more than 20 years ago, a truth Ethan had stolen, polished, and used to build an entire marriage on. And now it was over. If you're new here, this channel tells stories about real love, real betrayal, and the kind of truth that doesn't show up until you're ready to see it. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Vanessa had a memory she could never fully see, only feel. She was 7 years old. Her family had taken her to a street fair somewhere in the city. She couldn't remember which neighborhood, couldn't remember what they were celebrating. And somewhere between the food stalls and the crowd and the first heavy drops of a summer storm, she had looked up and realized she was alone. Completely, terrifyingly alone. She didn't scream. She just stood there in the middle of the sidewalk while everyone rushed past her, and the rain came down harder, and the world got very loud and very cold all at once. And then there was a boy. She couldn't remember his face. Even in the years that followed, when she tried to pull the memory into focus, it slipped away like a reflection in moving water. What she remembered was a voice, steady, unhurried, the kind of calm that had no business belonging to a child, and a pair of hands that guided her out of the middle of the foot traffic without asking permission or making a fuss. She remembered a wool sweater, dark green, that smelled like rain and laundry detergent. He had pulled it off and draped it over her shoulders without a word. They sat together under an awning until her mother found her 20 minutes later. She never learned his name, she never saw his face clearly, but she never forgot the feeling. And for the rest of her life, that feeling became the thing she measured everything else against. Safety, steadiness, someone who showed up without needing a reason. She was 31 when Ethan Cross showed up at a charity gala and told her he knew exactly what she was looking for. He was handsome in the way that Manhattan men are handsome. Sharp suits, sharper jaw, the kind of confidence that fills a room before the person does. He was 36. Already at the top of the real estate world, and he moved through social spaces the way water moves through a system of pipes. Efficiently, inevitably, always finding the right level. But it wasn't his money or his face that made Vanessa stop. It was what he said on their third date, in a quiet corner of a restaurant she couldn't have afforded on her own salary, when he leaned across the table and said, almost casually, "I think I've known you longer than you realize." He told her a story. A street fair, a summer storm, a little girl standing frozen in the middle of the sidewalk. He described it precisely enough to feel true, and loosely enough that Vanessa's own memory filled in the gaps, the way a listener always does when they want the story to be real. She had never told anyone the details of that afternoon, or so she believed. By the time he described kneeling beside her and saying, "You're okay, I've got you," she was already crying. She married him 11 months later. Across the city, in a 2-bedroom apartment in a quieter part of Brooklyn, a man named Marcus Carter was doing what he did every evening, sitting at the kitchen table helping his 7-year-old daughter Nia sound out words in a chapter book, one finger under each syllable, patient and unhurried, going nowhere. Neither of them knew yet what was coming. The first year of their marriage, Vanessa told herself the feeling would come back. Not love. She had plenty of that, or something that looked enough like it. What she waited for was the other thing. The feeling from the memory. The specific quality of safety she had felt as a 7-year-old under a striped awning while the rain came down outside. She had assumed when she married Ethan that living with him would gradually close the distance between the man in front of her and the boy in her memory, that time and closeness would make them the same person. Instead, the distance grew. It wasn't anything she could point to easily. Ethan was not a cruel man, not in ways that left visible marks. He was attentive in public and distracted in private. He was generous with money and careful with everything else. He planned things, vacations, dinner parties, anniversaries, with the precision of someone running a project, checking boxes and confirming outcomes. There was nothing wrong with any of it exactly. It simply never felt like him. It felt like a performance of him, executed by someone who had studied the role very thoroughly. When she tried to talk about it, he was always ready. She would bring up the street fair, carefully, obliquely, the way you test ice before putting your full weight on it, and Ethan would respond with exactly the right details. The crowd, the rain, the way she'd been standing there alone. Every time his version was accurate. Every time, something in his delivery made her feel like she was watching a man read from notes he'd memorized so long ago they no longer meant anything to him. There was one detail she kept coming back to. The sweater. The dark green wool sweater that smelled like rain and laundry detergent. The one the boy had pulled over her shoulders without being asked. She had never described it to Ethan. She had never described it to anyone. It was the kind of private sensory detail that lives in the body rather than in words. The kind you don't think to share because you barely know you're still holding on to it. Whenever the conversation came close to it, Ethan changed direction. Not obviously, not in a way she could call out. He would shift to another detail or ask her a question, or pick up his glass and look out the window in a way that landed just short of dismissive. But he never mentioned the sweater. Not once in 7 years. It was a small thing. She knew it was a small thing, but it was also the only thing she was completely certain about, and its absence was a hole she couldn't stop falling into. By their 5th year, the marriage had developed the silence of two people who have run out of ways to explain themselves to each other. Ethan did not understand what she was looking for, or he understood and had decided it was not something he was willing to give. Either way, the result was the same. Vanessa felt herself becoming a person who lived alongside her own life without quite inhabiting it. She filed for divorce on a Tuesday morning in March, at the office of a lawyer Ethan didn't know she'd already hired. The formal papers were served to him 2 weeks later. That was the moment he saw them on the table. The moment he asked her what she was throwing away. She didn't answer. She had already answered privately months before. The reaction from everyone around her was swift and unanimous. Her friends thought she was having a breakdown. Her mother asked her 3 times if there was someone else. The few colleagues who knew Ethan well enough to have an opinion delivered it without being asked. That she was making the worst mistake of her life. That men like Ethan Cross did not come around twice. That she would regret this within a year. Vanessa listened to all of it and said very little. There was no way to explain the real reason without sounding like a woman who had lost her grip on reality. That she had spent 7 years married to a man who might have built their entire relationship on a story that didn't belong to him. She wasn't even certain yet. But she was certain enough. She met Marcus Carter on a Wednesday afternoon in October, in the hallway of Clover Hill Elementary School. Vanessa had been dropping off her nephew Dylan, filling in for her sister who had a doctor's appointment and couldn't make it. She didn't know the school well, the layout, the parking, the rhythm of pickup and drop-off, and she arrived 7 minutes late, slightly out of breath, still wearing her work coat and carrying a tote bag with a broken strap she kept meaning to fix. The hallway was mostly empty by then. A few stragglers, a teacher propping open a door, and at the far end, crouched down to the height of a small girl in a yellow jacket, a man who was clearly in no hurry at all. Vanessa noticed him the way you notice stillness in a moving place. Everyone else was in motion, gathering bags, checking phones, calling out to kids, and this man was simply still. He was adjusting the collar of the little girl's jacket, straightening it with 2 hands, and saying something Vanessa couldn't hear from that distance. Whatever it was made the girl laugh and grab onto his arm. Vanessa found Dylan's classroom, signed him out, and was heading back toward the exit when the man stood up and turned around. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of face that looked like it had been through some weather and was better for it. He wasn't dressed like anyone from Ethan's world. Dark work jacket, worn jeans, boots that had actually been used for something. He held his daughter's backpack over one shoulder and her hand in his other hand, and he walked without any apparent awareness that anyone might be watching him, which, in Vanessa's experience, was exceedingly rare. They almost collided at the corner of the hallway. "Sorry," he said, and stepped to the side immediately, pulling his daughter with him so she wouldn't get bumped. "No, my fault," Vanessa said. "I don't know this hallway." He nodded, easy and unbothered, and that would have been the end of it, except that the little girl, who had been inspecting Vanessa with the frank curiosity of a 7-year-old, tugged on her father's sleeve and said, "Daddy, her bag is broken." Vanessa looked down at the tote bag. The strap had finally given up entirely and was now hanging by a single thread. The man glanced at it, then back at her. "She's right," he said. There was no amusement in it, no performance, just a statement of fact delivered gently. "I know," Vanessa said. "I've been meaning to deal with that." "There's a bench by the front office," he said. "If you've got something to tie it off with, it'll hold until you get home." She didn't have anything to tie it with. He produced a short bungee cord from his jacket pocket, the kind of person evidently who carried bungee cords, and knotted the strap together in about 15 seconds without making a production of it. Then he handed the bag back, picked up his daughter's hand again and said, "Have a good evening," and walked toward the exit. Vanessa stood in the hallway holding her bag. Something had shifted in her chest. Not dramatically, not the way it happened in the stories people told about falling in love. More like the moment when you've been hearing a sound for so long you stopped registering it, and then it stops, and the silence is so specific you finally understand what you'd been listening to all along. She hadn't felt it in 7 years. She felt it now, in a school hallway, because a man she had never met had straightened his daughter's collar and produced a bungee cord from his pocket and spoken to her without a single angle in his voice. On the drive home, she told herself it meant nothing, that she was raw from the divorce and reading significance into coincidences. She almost believed it. They ran into each other twice more before either of them learned the other's name. Once at the school's fall fundraiser where Vanessa was helping her sister set up tables, and Marcus was carrying folding chairs from a storage room because someone had asked and he hadn't seen a reason to say no. Once at the coffee shop 2 blocks from the school, where they ended up standing in the same line, and he remembered her broken bag, and she told him she'd bought a new one, which made Nia, who was beside him, inspect the new bag with great seriousness and declare it acceptable. By the 3rd time, a Saturday morning at the farmer's market near Prospect Park, it stopped feeling like coincidence and started feeling like something that needed to be acknowledged. His name was Marcus Carter. He worked in building maintenance and facilities management for a mid-sized commercial property company in downtown Brooklyn. He had been raising Nia alone since she was 2, when her mother had left and made clear she wasn't coming back. He said this last part without bitterness, with the tone of a man who had processed something difficult and arrived somewhere solid on the other side of it. He asked about her in the careful way that people ask when they're genuinely curious but don't want to intrude. She told him she was recently divorced, that she worked in nonprofit communications, that she was still figuring out what came next. She did not tell him about the memory, or about Ethan, or about the feeling she'd had in the school hallway. Not yet. What she noticed, in the weeks that followed, was how different it felt to be near Marcus than to be near anyone from her previous life. There was no strategy in the way he talked to her, no calibration. Ethan had always made her feel like she was being managed, warmly, skillfully, but managed nonetheless, the way a good host manages a dinner party. Marcus simply talked to her. When he didn't know something, he said so. When something she said surprised him, his face showed it before he had a chance to decide whether to let it. He didn't fill silences with noise. He wasn't performing ease. He simply was easy, in the way that some people are, as though they decided a long time ago that life was too short to be anyone other than themselves. Nia helped, in the way that children sometimes do, by having no tolerance for pretense. She liked Vanessa immediately and without reservation, and she expressed this by talking to her constantly whenever they were in the same space, about her teacher, about a book she was reading, about a bird she had seen on the fire escape that she was convinced was sending her a message. Vanessa found herself looking forward to it. It was Marcus who pulled back first. He brought it up on a Sunday evening when they had run into each other at the park and ended up walking the same loop twice while Nia ran ahead. He said it the way he said most things, directly, without decoration. "I think you're still in the middle of something," he said. "And I don't say that as a criticism. I just think you are." Vanessa didn't deny it. "I have a daughter," he continued. "She's already attached to you, which is—" He paused. "That's not a small thing for her. She doesn't get attached easily. So I have to be careful about what I let become a part of her life before I understand what it is." It was the most honest thing anyone had said to her in years. She almost told him right then, about the memory, about Ethan, about the green sweater and the feeling she couldn't name. But the words weren't ready yet, and she could see he wasn't asking for them. "I understand," she said. He nodded. They walked the rest of the loop in silence, and it was the most comfortable silence she had stood inside in longer than she could remember. But the distance Ethan had already begun to close in on them had nothing to do with honesty or caution. It had to do with power. Ethan found out the way Ethan always found out about things, through someone who owed him something. What gave Marcus away was a detail Ethan himself had supplied without realizing it. Years before the divorce, Vanessa had once mentioned to Ethan that the boy from the street fair had been black. She had said it casually as a fragment of memory, not understanding why it mattered. Ethan had filed it away. When Vanessa's name began appearing in connection with a black man from Brooklyn, a man with no money, no connections, no reason to be in her orbit except the most inconvenient kind, Ethan understood immediately what it might mean. He didn't know the full truth yet, but he knew enough to be afraid of it. Vanessa didn't know which thread he had pulled, only that within 2 weeks of her and Marcus becoming a regular presence in each other's lives, Ethan's attorney sent her a message suggesting they revisit certain terms of the divorce settlement. It was not a legal threat, not technically. It was the kind of message designed to remind her that Ethan Cross had a very long reach and was not above using it. She ignored it. 3 days later, Marcus mentioned, with a casualness she could tell was deliberate, that there had been a complication at work. A contract his company had been expecting came through with conditions that made it nearly impossible to fulfill. His supervisor wasn't sure where the pressure was coming from. Marcus had his suspicions, but no proof. Vanessa knew exactly where it was coming from. She didn't tell him yet. She sat with it for a week, turning it over, feeling the old, familiar weight of being married to a man who treated the world like a chessboard and everyone on it like pieces to be moved. She had spent 7 years inside that dynamic without fully naming it. She was not going to step back inside it now. It was during that week, alone in her apartment with a glass of wine and a box of old photographs her mother had sent, that Vanessa found the thread that unraveled everything. She had been going through the box looking for a specific photo, her and her sister at a birthday party sometime in the mid-90s, when she came across a picture she didn't remember being taken. She was 7 years old in it, standing on a sidewalk in wet clothes, holding a paper cup of something hot. She was not looking at the camera. She was looking at something off to the left, with an expression of absolute relief on her face. Her mother had written on the back in ballpoint pen, "Harrison Street Fair, August 1994, the afternoon V got lost." Vanessa stared at the photo for a long time. Then she called her mother. The conversation lasted 2 hours. Her mother remembered the afternoon clearly, the panic, the search, the eventual relief of finding Vanessa safe and dry under a shop awning near the end of the block. She remembered that a boy had been with her, a young black boy, maybe 8 or 9, who had stayed with Vanessa the entire time without being asked, and who had left quietly once Vanessa's mother arrived, before anyone thought to get his name. He had his own situation, her mother said. There was another boy with him, younger, very scared. I assumed they were brothers. The younger one, he'd gotten separated from someone too, I think. The older boy was taking care of both of them. Vanessa set her wine glass down very carefully. What did the younger boy look like? Her mother described him. Light-skinned, dark hair, maybe 5 or 6 years old. Crying when they arrived, calmer by the time they left. The older boy had been talking to him steadily the whole time, the way you talk someone down from a ledge. Vanessa thought about Ethan at 6 years old. She thought about the story he had told her on their 3rd date, The crowd, the rain, the little girl standing alone. She thought about how he had described it from the inside, from the perspective of the one doing the helping. She thought about how she had cried and believed him and married him 11 months later. Then she thought about the sweater, dark green wool, the smell of rain and laundry detergent. The boy who had given her his sweater had not been the frightened one. He had been the steady one, the one managing 2 scared children at once, the one who left before anyone could thank him. She didn't sleep that night. By morning, she had a single clear thought, the kind that arrives after enough hours of silence. Ethan Cross had not been the boy who helped her. He had been the other boy, the lost one, the frightened one, the one who was helped. He had known about that afternoon because he had been there, but on the wrong side of the story. He had taken what he remembered, a boy, a girl, a rainstorm, and rebuilt it with himself at the center, knowing Vanessa's memory was too blurred to challenge him. He had stolen the story from the boy who actually lived it, and the boy who actually lived it was Marcus Carter. She was so certain of it that her hands shook, not with doubt, but with the violence of a truth that has been waiting too long to be recognized. She understood now why Ethan's version had always felt right in its facts and wrong in its texture. He had been there. He had witnessed it. But he had witnessed it as the child being comforted, not the child doing the comforting. And no amount of rehearsal could teach a person the interior of an experience they had only watched from the outside. Ethan Cross had built their entire marriage on a memory that belonged to someone else. And the man it belonged to was sitting across town right now in a 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn, reading his daughter a bedtime story, with no idea that his past had just caught up with both of them. She needed something real, something that existed outside of her own memory and her mother's recollection, because she understood with cold clarity that Ethan's lawyers would dismantle both in under an hour. A woman with a blurred childhood memory and a mother who remembered a rainy afternoon 30 years ago was not evidence. It was a story, and Ethan was very good at competing with stories. So she waited, and while she waited, Ethan moved. The pressure on Marcus's contract quietly intensified. His supervisor called him into a meeting and used words like restructuring and budget review in ways that meant nothing specific and everything general. A colleague told Marcus carefully that someone had been asking questions about him, his background, his finances, whether he'd had any prior involvement with clients or associates of the company. The implication was clear even without being stated. Someone with influence was trying to make Marcus Carter look like a problem. At the same time, a story started circulating in the social circles Vanessa had spent 7 years inhabiting. She heard it secondhand, then third-hand, then read a version of it in a gossip column that didn't name anyone, but described the situation precisely enough that everyone who knew them would recognize it immediately. The story went like this. A prominent businessman's ex-wife, still emotionally destabilized after the divorce, had become entangled with an opportunistic man who had identified her as a vulnerable target. The businessman, to his credit, was handling it with discretion and concern for his former wife's well-being. Vanessa read it twice. Then she put her phone down and sat very still for a moment. It was elegant, she had to admit. Ethan had reframed the entire situation so that he was the reasonable party and Marcus was the threat. He hadn't said anything overtly false. He never did. He had simply arranged the available facts into a shape that served him, which was the thing he had always been best at. Marcus called her that evening. He had seen something, she wasn't sure how much, and his voice was careful in the way it got when he was working hard to stay steady. "I need to ask you something directly," he said. "Okay. Is this going to keep coming?" She didn't pretend not to understand. "I don't know yet," she said. "I'm trying to find something. If I find it, it stops. If I don't..." She stopped. "If you don't," he said, "then I have to think about Nia." There it was. Not an ultimatum. Marcus wasn't built for ultimatums. It was something more honest than that. A man telling her exactly where his limit was, not to punish her, but because she deserved to know. "She's already asking about you," he said quietly. "She asked me this morning if you were going to come to her school play next month. I didn't know what to tell her." Vanessa closed her eyes. She thought about a 7-year-old girl in a yellow jacket who had inspected her replacement tote bag with great seriousness and declared it acceptable. She thought about what it meant that Nia had decided she was trustworthy, and what it would mean if she turned out not to be. "Tell her I'll try," Vanessa said. After she hung up, she went back to the box of old photographs and started from the beginning. She found it at the bottom of the box, wrapped in a plastic grocery bag that had gone brittle with age. She almost missed it. She had been through the photographs twice already, had set aside everything that seemed relevant, and was about to close the box when her hand caught the edge of the bag and she pulled it out without thinking. Inside was a child's sweater, dark green wool, small enough to have fit a boy of 8 or 9, the kind of garment that had been well made and well worn and then folded away and forgotten for 3 decades. Vanessa sat very still on her apartment floor. She brought it to her face. The smell of rain was long gone, replaced by the neutral mustiness of stored things. But the color was exactly right. The texture was exactly right. And when she turned the collar back with fingers that had started to shake, she found what she had not dared to hope for. A name, written in faded black marker in the careful block letters of a mother who did not want her child's things to get lost at school. Marcus C. She called him at 9:15 at night and asked if she could come over. He said yes without asking why, which she would think about later as one of the truest things about him. Nia was already asleep. Marcus let Vanessa in and didn't say anything when he saw her face, just moved aside and gestured toward the kitchen table, the universal language of, "Sit down, I'll make something hot." He put the kettle on. She set the plastic bag on the table between them. "I need to show you something," she said, "and I need you to tell me honestly whether you recognize it." He sat down across from her. She reached into the bag and placed the sweater on the table. Marcus looked at it for a long moment without touching it. His expression didn't change dramatically. It wasn't that kind of man. But something shifted behind his eyes, a movement like a door opening somewhere deep in a house. He reached out and turned the collar back, read the name, set the collar down. "My mother used to do that," he said. "Write my name in everything. She said I was always giving things away and forgetting to ask for them back." He paused. "I still do that." "Do you remember a street fair?" Vanessa asked. "Harrison Street, August 1994. There was a storm." The silence that followed was not the silence of someone trying to remember. It was the silence of someone watching a memory they hadn't visited in a long time come slowly back into focus. "There was a kid," he said finally. "Little boy, maybe 5 or 6. He was completely lost, crying. I found him near one of the food stalls. I didn't know what to do with him exactly, so I just stayed with him, kept him calm until someone came." "Was there a girl?" Vanessa asked. Marcus looked at her, really looked at her, in the way he had of looking at things he wanted to understand fully before he spoke about them. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Little girl, standing by herself on the sidewalk. She was soaked. I gave her my sweater because she was shaking." He stopped. "I didn't get it back. I remember thinking my mom was going to be annoyed." Vanessa's eyes filled. She didn't try to stop it. "The little boy," she said. "Light-skinned, dark hair, very scared." "Yeah." "That was Ethan Cross." The kitchen was very quiet. Somewhere in the apartment, a clock ticked. Marcus sat with what she had just told him and didn't rush past it, didn't reach for a reaction before he'd actually processed the information. It was, she thought, one of the most distinctly Marcus things she had ever witnessed. "He told you he was the one who helped you," Marcus said finally. It wasn't a question. "On our 3rd date," she said. "He described the whole afternoon, from your side of it." Marcus exhaled slowly through his nose. He looked at the sweater on the table between them. "So the boy I spent 2 hours keeping calm," he said, "grew up and used that afternoon to marry you." "Yes." Another silence. Then, "And he's been coming after me because you're the one thing he can't account for," Vanessa said. "If you exist in my life, the story falls apart. He's known that from the moment I told him about you." Marcus leaned back in his chair and looked at the ceiling for a moment. When he looked back down, his expression was not angry. Not yet, or maybe not in the way she expected. It was something quieter and more painful than anger. It was the look of a man absorbing the cruelty of having a good thing taken from him, not by chance, but by intention. "I didn't even know your name," he said. "That afternoon, I just stayed until someone came. That's all I did." "I know," Vanessa said, "and he turned that into—" He stopped, shook his head. "Yes," she said. He looked at the sweater for a long time. Then he looked at her, and what passed between them in that moment required no words. Not because it was too small for language, but because it was too large for it. The message from Ethan came at 7:15 the next morning. Vanessa was still at her kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee when it arrived. A single text, no greeting, no signature, written in the flat, declarative tone he used when he wanted to sound reasonable while delivering a threat. "I know what you think you found. Before you do something you can't undo, consider what it costs the people around you. Not just you." She read it 3 times. Then she set her phone face down on the table and thought about what the people around you meant in Ethan Cross's vocabulary. She didn't have to wait long to find out. Marcus called her at 8:45. His voice was doing the careful, steady thing it did when he was managing something difficult. "I got a call from Nia's school this morning," he said. "From the assistant principal. She wants to meet with me this week about Nia's home environment." Vanessa's stomach dropped. "She didn't say much," Marcus continued, "but she mentioned that the school had received a concern from an anonymous donor, someone who contributes significantly to the school's annual fund, and had raised questions about whether Nia's current home situation was stable enough for her to remain enrolled." The precision of it was almost impressive. Ethan hadn't threatened Marcus directly. That would have been too visible, too easy to characterize as harassment. Instead, he had found the one thing Marcus could not protect by being careful or patient or reasonable. He had gone after Nia's school. He had made the question not about Marcus's character in general, but about his fitness as a father in the specific place where his daughter spent 7 hours a day and had, for the first time since her mother left, found a version of normal she felt safe inside. "Marcus, I'm not angry at you," he said immediately, which told her that he had considered being angry and decided against it, which was somehow worse than if he'd just been angry. "I just need to think. I know. I have to put Nia first. I always have to put Nia first. You understand that?" "I do," she said. "I would never ask you not to." The silence that followed was different from the comfortable silences they had built over the past weeks. This one had weight in it. The weight of a man measuring what he stood to lose against what he believed was right, and not finding an easy answer. "If I step back," he said slowly. He stops. Everything goes back to normal for her. The school thing goes away. The work thing goes away, all of it. He stopped. "And maybe that's the right thing to do. Maybe I don't have the right to put her through this for something that happened 30 years ago." Vanessa understood with sudden and terrible clarity what was happening. Ethan had calculated this exactly right. He hadn't gone after Marcus's pride or his finances or his reputation in the abstract. He had found the specific lever that would make a good man voluntarily walk away. And that lever was a 7-year-old girl in a yellow jacket who had already been abandoned once and couldn't afford to be destabilized again. Ethan was going to win by making Marcus's own love for his daughter into the weapon. "Don't decide anything yet," Vanessa said. "Give me 2 days." "Vanessa." 2 days, she said. "That's all I'm asking." Another silence. She could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, the slow and deliberate breath of someone trying to stay steady when steadiness was costing them something. 2 days, he said finally. After she hung up, she sat at the kitchen table for a long time without moving. She thought about Ethan's message. She thought about Nia's school play and whether Nia was still expecting her to come. She thought about a box of old photographs and a brittle plastic bag and a child's sweater with a name written in the collar in faded black marker. Then she picked up her phone and made a different call entirely. The call she made was to a journalist named Patricia Wells. Vanessa had known Patricia for 6 years through non-profit work. She was one of the few people in media Vanessa trusted to be precise, to care about getting things right, and to understand that a story about a billionaire manipulating a grieving woman's childhood memory was not tabloid gossip. It was something else entirely. Patricia answered on the second ring and listened without interrupting for 22 minutes. When Vanessa finished, Patricia said, "Do you have physical evidence?" "Yes." "Bring it in tomorrow morning." The next morning, before she left for Patricia's office, Vanessa stopped by Marcus's apartment. She hadn't called ahead. She wasn't sure he would let her in if she did, and she needed to see him in person. Not to convince him of anything, but because she owed him the honesty of her face. He opened the door in a gray sweatshirt and looked at her the way he looked at things he hadn't decided how to feel about yet. "I'm going to Patricia Wells," she said. "Today. The sweater, the photo, my mother's account, all of it. I'm not asking you to do anything. I just thought you deserved to know." He was quiet for a moment. Behind him, from the direction of the kitchen table, came the sound of Nia working on something, the deliberate scratch of a crayon against paper. "You could still walk away from this," he said. "It would be easier." "I know," she said. "I'm not interested in easier." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he stepped back from the door. She came inside. Nia looked up from the kitchen table when Vanessa appeared and immediately held out the piece of paper she'd been working on, with the satisfied expression of someone who has completed something important. "I made this for you," Nia said, "because you looked sad last time." Vanessa took the drawing. It was 3 figures under a gray sky, a woman, a man, and a small girl between them, all rendered in the unself-conscious lines of a child who draws what she sees without worrying about whether it's accurate. Above them, Nia had drawn what was unmistakably rain, dozens of small vertical lines falling from a solid gray cloud. And over the woman's shoulders, colored in dark green crayon, was something that looked like a jacket or a sweater, draped there by the figure standing closest to it. Nia had not been told about the sweater. She had not been told about Harrison Street, or August 1994, or any of it. She had simply drawn what she understood about her father, that he was the kind of person who covered people when it was cold, and in doing so, had drawn the truest possible image of the thing Vanessa had been searching for her entire adult life. Vanessa pressed the drawing against her chest and did not trust herself to speak for a moment. "It's perfect," she finally managed. "Thank you, Nia." Nia nodded, satisfied, and went back to her crayons. Patricia Wells published the piece 3 weeks later. It was careful and thorough and devastating in the way that careful, thorough journalism can be. It laid out the timeline clearly. The Harrison Street Fair, the photograph, the sweater with the name in the collar, Vanessa's mother's account, the anonymous pressure placed on Marcus's employer, the complaint filed with Nia's school through a donor who turned out to be traceable to a shell account connected to one of Ethan's charitable foundations. It did not editorialize. It did not need to. The facts arranged themselves into a shape that spoke for itself. Marcus gave a single quote. Vanessa had asked if he wanted to, and he had thought about it for a day before agreeing. His quote was 11 words long. "I stayed with 2 scared kids until someone came. That's all." It was the most quoted line in every piece that followed. Ethan's response came through his publicist, a statement expressing concern for his former wife's mental health and suggesting the story was the product of grief and instability following their divorce. It was the response of a man who had always been able to control the narrative, and did not yet understand that the narrative had already moved past him. The sweater did what no amount of testimony could have done on its own. It was a physical object. It had a name on it. It had been in Vanessa's family's possession for 30 years, stored in a box her mother had never had any reason to manufacture. There was no version of events in which Ethan Cross's name appeared on the collar of a child's sweater that had been on Vanessa's shoulders that afternoon. Within 2 weeks, 2 of Ethan's business partners had quietly distanced themselves. The anonymous complaint against Nia's school enrollment was withdrawn without explanation. The pressure on Marcus's workplace contract evaporated as suddenly as it had appeared. Ethan did not apologize. Vanessa had not expected him to. Apology required the acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and acknowledging wrongdoing required a man to believe on some level that other people's experiences were as real as his own. That had never been Ethan's strength. What he had taken from her, 7 years, a marriage, a memory she had carried since childhood, he would not give back. She had understood that before she made the call to Patricia. She had made it anyway. Some things you do not do because they restore what was lost. You do them because silence has a cost too, and you have finally decided you are done paying it. 3 months after the article ran, Vanessa went to Nia's school play. She sat in the 3rd row beside Marcus, in an auditorium that smelled like construction paper and floor wax, and watched Nia play a tree in a production about the seasons. A role Nia had described as the most important one because trees are in every season, and had prepared for with the total commitment of someone who did not yet understand the concept of a small part. Nia stood very straight in her brown and green costume and delivered her single line with great seriousness. In the front row, a grandmother in the audience laughed warmly. Nia did not break character. Marcus watched his daughter with the expression of a man who has decided, after considerable difficulty, that the world is still worth showing up for. Afterward, in the parking lot, Nia walked between them and held both their hands without asking permission, with the matter-of-fact confidence of a child who has decided something and sees no reason to announce it. The evening air was cool and carried the first real edge of winter. "Daddy says you used to know each other," Nia said. "When you were little." "Sort of," Vanessa said. "We didn't know each other's names, but we were in the same place once." Nia considered this. "And then you found each other again?" "Eventually," Marcus said. "That's a long time to find someone," Nia said, with the mild disapproval of a person who would have handled things more efficiently. Vanessa laughed. A real laugh, the kind that arrives without warning and costs nothing. Marcus glanced over Nia's head at her with a small, quiet smile, the kind he kept for moments he didn't want to editorialize. She thought about what she had spent 30 years looking for. Not a man, not a marriage, not a version of herself that felt like it finally made sense. Just this, the feeling she had sat inside for 20 minutes as a 7-year-old under an awning while the rain came down. The specific, irreplaceable feeling of being near someone who showed up without conditions and stayed without being asked. She had not lost it after all. She had only been carrying it in the wrong direction. The real thing about this story isn't the billionaire, and it isn't the betrayal. It's something quieter than that. It's the reminder that the people who show up without needing credit, the ones who give you their sweater and walk away before you can even say thank you, those people leave a mark that no amount of money or charm can replicate. You might spend years chasing the wrong person because someone else learned to imitate that feeling. But the feeling itself doesn't lie. It just waits. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't already, subscribe. There are more stories like this one coming, and you don't want to find them 30 years too late.